Jakub Nowak. I mamy tutaj opis w języku angielskim, także pozwolę sobie na chwilę zmienić język na aliantów i opowiedzieć kilka słów na temat Jakuba. Jakub, a software developer in test with 7+ years of overall industry experience, for the last 4 years working as an SAT in .NET stack, helping teams and organizations transform their approach to testing and quality in general. Privately, gamer, a photography enthusiast. Ladies and gentlemen, Jakub Nowak on Shifting Left.
Dziękuję. Tylko się jeszcze odnajdę z prezentacją. Tu masz. Dobra, mamy to. Cześć. Fajnie widzieć, że parę osób się znalazło po bankiecie. Bałem się, że będę mówił do pustej sali. Dzisiaj chciałbym opowiedzieć wam o moich doświadczeniach z wprowadzaniem Shift Left w 2 projektach, w których miałem okazję pracować. Poopowiadać o tym, jak to zrobiliśmy, jakie mieliśmy problemy. Takie case study. Krótko o mnie, chociaż to już zostało... Yeah, I can try at least, if it helps you. Okay, is it okay? Yeah, that's a segue, and anyhow. In short, about me, most of the stuff has been already said. So I'm Kuba. I'm a software engineering test in EPAM systems. In the industry, I have been for more than 7 years, and since around 4, I've been focused only on a .NET stack and mainly .NET Microsoft stack, so C#, Azure, etc., etc. Of course, you have my LinkedIn. If anybody have any questions after the presentations, feel free to reach out. Going to the presentation itself, I would like to start with what Shift Left is and perhaps what it isn't. So I'm gonna be honest here with you guys. I'm not gonna sell you a silver bullet or like universal recipe. It doesn't work like that, basically. When I think about Shift Left, it's more like a mindset that team and organization can take an approach to how we tackle the quality, how we build the quality into product, what we test and on what levels. Also, which will be also displayed in my case study, you will notice that basically your mileage may totally vary, because the 2 examples that I have, they are radically and totally different from one another. Okay, going through the boring stuff, through the introduction. As you can see, we have a slide with basically 3 quality models showing basically how much test volume happens where in life cycle of application. So as you can see, compared to like the traditional model or the shift right model, in the shift left, we always want to place as much of the test activities and testing related activities as soon as possible. So ideally, most of this stuff should happen somewhere before merging our functionality into the develop branch, for example. Going to what activities are we most interested in the shift left? Of course, I have the test pyramid here, and as you can see, the stuff that is the most interesting for us here is the red one. So it's basically either automated API tests or automated component tests or integration tests. Why? Because they are fast. And basically, in the ideal approach, we want to leave the automated GUI tests only for testing the main business flows, the main critical business stuff that we want covered to see that it works. But the core, the whole business logic, the whole validation logic, it should be tested and covered as low as possible. So our feedback loop is as short as possible. Of course, the IceCon model could work for start if we, for example, are still learning the application, don't know the domain, of course. But then we need to keep in mind that going further, adding more tests, more functionalities, we will extend that feedback loop. So basically having a lot of these GUI tests, at some point of time, it's gonna slow us down to the extent that we'll reach the point where we'll need to consider transforming into more classic approach with the classic test pyramid. Okay. When it comes to the typical roles, because I have told about the test volumes, what happens and where, but it also changes a bit when it comes to the roles in a team. So of course, we have developers, and mostly they do the developer development activity, so implementing features, bug fixing, or implementing unit tests. But when we think about shift left, the developers also need to start writing tests, and on each and every level. Because the QA or SDET, so software development engineer in tests role, is also here usually just to help these developers learn. So the whole team is focused on quality, and the whole team is capable of developing tests and increasing the coverage. So the tester or the test automation engineer isn't the bottleneck here. So we are like, properly shifted left. I also have a manual QA here. It's not always the case. I actually worked in a project that didn't have any of manual QAs in our team. So basically the whole manual activities shifted towards the rest of the team. So there wasn't a temptation to push some of the manual testing on a tester only. Okay, going into case studies. I will start with the first one. So basically it was client for the Nordic market, mainly for helping Swedish municipalities with social related stuff. And we actually started a new department in one of the Polish cities. The team was new. The project was greenfield, although it was a part of a bigger package that was sold to the mentioned municipalities. So basically what we needed to do is to set up our ways of working, start the new project, and show the business people that, well, it was a good decision. And when it comes to the team, we worked in a Scrum, and here I have to admit it was one of the best implementations of Scrum that I have seen. So the team was truly cross-functional. So we had no external dependencies, and the whole team consisted of 6 persons. And we basically had a QA skill set, the development skill set, as well as UX skill set. So everything was covered. And the agreement and approach we have taken was to automate from the start and automate as much as we possible to avoid doing manual testing of the application, like the regular scripted manual testing. So not much of writing of manual test cases, etc., in favor of high coverage of test automation. Okay, when it comes to the implementation, how we achieve that. So first things first, we needed to leverage the QA knowledge on the, for example, backlog refinements, because as I mentioned, it was very, very good agile process. So it was often like the product owner came to us with some idea of some feature, but he wasn't sure how it's going to look like. It was the team responsibility to figure out how it should look like, how it should work to fulfill this business needs. So again, this QA mindset, this tester's mindset was very helpful on that level, just to be able to determine what we need to test, what can go wrong, and on which level we need to cover our test automation. And as I mentioned before, we didn't have a dedicated manual tester in the team. So again, our approach and our agreement was that once the code is in a pull request state, so once it's submitted for code review, it's the reviewer responsibility to verify that the acceptance criteria are met, definition of done is met, and the application is working. When it comes to our test automation, it was part of the definition of done from the start. And as I mentioned before, it was also part usually of a user story. So on the user story level, on the refinement level, we usually, in most of the cases, decided what we want to automate. So at the point in time when it was the moment to pull that item into sprint, we precisely knew what could go wrong and what we need to cover by test automation and on which level. And the probably most interesting part here is that as we didn't have dedicated person to do that test automation, the automation always was part of the same sprint when the feature was created. So either it was in ATDD manner when we created the API or UI test even before the feature is implemented, or it was done in parallel, but always in scope of the same sprint. So when we had the pull requests or code review request, we also had a test set to automated test set to cover that. Coming to the issues that we had and we have encountered, for starters, having no manual testing from the start, because as I mentioned, we haven't had that, it came out that we have a lot of UI glitches. For example, in different browsers, or some buttons could be misplaced in some strange resolutions, etc., etc. And another thing was translations. As the application was for the Nordic market, it was used by our clients in Swedish, and our product owner was also Swedish. Of course, no one from the team knew Swedish, so we developed in English. So basically, it looked like we got the translations from our product owner, we put them into the application, but then often it came back to us after a while that, well, you know, guys, something is a bit out of context, or something's missing, or I would spell it differently. So basically what we've done to fix that, to mitigate that, is exploratory testing sessions. So the, again, approach here was to schedule a 1 hour time box per week, so basically 2 hours per sprint, to conduct exploratory sessions. Of course, not whole team was involved in that. We decided to rotate people each week, so it wasn't like the same persons doing same stuff over and over again. And furthermore, to help with that, to have some baseline, we decided to create some high-level mind maps of features that we had in application, just so people, even new people who joined the team, were able to determine what are the main business flows that happen in application and what to explore through. The second issue that we have encountered was basically problem with the model of the test pyramid that we had from start, because we started not knowing the domain. So I would say 80% of our tests were on the UI level. So we encountered basically the same case that I mentioned before. With time, basically the test execution took so much time that it was almost useless for us. So basically, again, to mitigate that, we decided to start paying off this technical debt and picking up backlog items and additional technical debt items just to be able to transform us to lower levels. So with time, with around half a year through, we managed to move most of the field validation into front-end unit test level, most of the business logic tests to the API end-to-end testing level. So basically, at the end of the day, the Selenium test, as I again mentioned before, were only responsible for testing the main business flows, and we regained that speed. Okay, when it comes to the outcomes, I think that the good highlight is that after 3 years, we managed to grow that department in this particular city from 1 team and 6 persons to over 5 teams and over 40 people. So clearly people were happy. We had no major production incidents. Of course, there were some minor bugs or issues, etc., but nothing that would stop application from running on production. And of course, somewhere in the meantime, as the initial version of this whole package that was sold, that I mentioned, was basically only installed on customers' on-premise servers. At some point of time, we were able to migrate that also to cloud, to Azure. So basically that allowed us our further journey into continuous deployment. So basically adding another quality gate where we were able at the pull request level, deploy application with some predefined set of data, run our tests, and only after that, the developer was able to merge his code, so we were sure that there's no regression there. And the last, the whole team was totally involved in quality, thanks to that approach. So it came even to the situations where sometimes we had to tell product owner, well, you know, we have that feature ready, but we don't feel comfortable with quality of it. So we would like to spill it over even to next sprint, but to polish up the quality so the stuff that we produce is really good. And last thing, the whole team was able to write test automation on each and every level, so we had no bottleneck here. Coming to the second case, and that one is actually totally different because it actually goes from the top, not from the bottom of the team. So here we had a client who apparently spent a ton of money on manual testing efforts. And well, somebody on C-level figured out, what can we do with that? So the approach was, well, maybe we can shift left the whole teams. So they hired a ton of people, created a separate department, just in order to start that transformation of the organization. And basically the main and general idea here was that they hire people with SDET or software engineering test profile, who are very, very experienced, to work as a consultants with the team and help them transform, learn the good ways of working, to see how good automation and reliable test automations look like. So the problem here was that the project, this particular one we were placed in, it was already ongoing for more than a year, and they only had one manual QA, so no test automation at all. When it comes to implementation of that, as we didn't have this like natural phase where we learned application as a team, learned the business domain, etc. Here, basically the first thing that we had to do is to investigate, like, hey, what this application even does, what is the business purposes, what we should test. Also, do the risk-based analysis, what we should cover, what should be covered by the test first, just to be able to like benefit from it from the start as soon as possible. What was also important in this case, that as we worked as consultants, so we were mainly to help, to support the team, the deal was that it was the team who's responsible for implementing that at the end of the day. Of course, with our helps as a pair programming support, providing some boilerplate or tooling, but it was still the team who should do that. Because the general plan of the organization was that we, as software engineers in test, at some point of time, we're gonna end that engagement and go to a different team. So this particular team should learn during that period when they have us, just to be able to sustain that quality, that test automation on its own. Okay, when it comes to the issues that we encountered here, as it was financial rated institution, the strict security policies slowed us down a lot. Basically, even the simple thing, like ordering a user for test automation, so we can run it on the CI, it came down to going from manager to manager, or week after week. At the end of the day, it took actually a couple of months just to have this user set up. Another problem, I have it mentioned as a team not sticking to commitments. Now I realize that it's more not only team, but also the business side. So, someone at the high level decided it's gonna be a great idea. Team initially said, well, it's a good idea, we want to do that. But once we set up all of the boilerplate, and the time came that, well, team needs to step up and start using our knowledge to work on their own, to implement the tests on their own, well, the product owner, the business people, usually came with excuse like, oh no, not this sprint, we have a very important release this sprint, or we have very important bug this week. So basically that caused us to, again, slow down a lot and do not have these results as quick as in previous example, because despite like superficial commitment, on the low level, on the team and the product owner level, there was no much interest in doing that, despite they agreed to spend some time on that. But to not be so grim about it, we actually managed to set up at least a couple of good quality gates. So the first one, again, was at the pull request level. So we were able to implement our test automation at basically component level using .NET Web Application Factory. So as it's, maybe not probably, but actually it's closer when we think about test levels to unit tests, and is able to set up and start up the whole API for us in memory, with in-memory database, we were able to cover most of the cases on that level. Basically, that means that it was logged into CI and took around 2 minutes just to verify it to run. So again, we had a very, very quick feedback. Apart from that, part of the first quality gate, also the code metrics. So apart from the code coverage, we also were able to implement, for example, mutation tests, and surprise, surprise, despite the quite high code coverage, the mutation score was low. So there was something definitely wrong with the unit test that the team has. And basically having that mutation tests using Striker were able to also help us to figure out what are the areas that need better coverage when it comes to the unit testing. And of course, apart from that, static code analyzes SonarQube and basically triggering a comment once a code smell has happened on the PR. And after that, we had a second quality gate, basically happening after the change hit the develop branch. So the whole suite of API end-to-end tests with the deployment of application, then running our test just to be sure that everything works as expected. Okay, when it comes to the conclusions of that, we definitely can say that in both of the cases, this approach brought some value. Whether it was like, a lot of value or tiny of value, there was actually, in both of cases, there was some. Of course, the different reasons were behind that change that was implemented. So in one case, it was the team who wanted to speed up their processes to proceed as fast as possible, to do not have manual testing. In the second one, it was basically organization who wanted to save money. And it's also tightly connected with the time needed to see the actual improvement of that approach. So in the first case, we actually saw that improvements from the sprint one because we have automation from the start. We learned the application as a team from the start. In the second one, to be honest with all of you, it took around a year to be able to motivate team enough, to cover enough, to see some or any benefits from that. And of course, again, the buy-in from organization here would be critical because, again, in the first case, the organization and the business just wanted to have as good product as possible. In the second one, they wanted to cut costs. Superficially, they wanted that. But at the lower levels, we encountered a lot of issues. Okay. When it comes to the benefits, actually, I split it into two, the one for the projects and the one for me. So, of course, this shift-left approach, it goes really, really well with the whole agile ways of working, as well as with the DevOps approach. Looking at it from the long term, it will drive our costs down, usually. If, for example, in the first example I mentioned, we saved a lot by not having a dedicated manual tester. Of course, again, looking from the longer perspective, our delivery speed will increase. Again, we have everything automated. And the quality would also go up as the whole team is involved in that quality. And that basically comes from the previous points. Our feedback loop is shortening because, again, we have as much test cramped on as low level as possible. And of course, the buzz factor and bottlenecks are reduced because having the team knowing how to write tests, of course, the developers won't be as good, for example, as experienced test automation engineer in writing tests. But having at least some knowledge, we avoid situation where somebody goes to vacation and then comes back and have a ton of tests to be written because the team went on, produced a lot of features, but not necessarily covered that with tests. For me, the main advantage was that I have a lot of possibilities to grow. As I was there mainly in the QA or as that role, apart from helping the team understand the quality mindset, the tester's mindset, I had a lot of time to learn different stuff. So again, the first team was very cross-functional. So I was basically able also to work on my development skills, to implement some features, do some bug fixes, as well as work on the more DevOps-oriented stuff, like setting up pipelines, continuous integration, etc., etc. And of course, that's very straightforward. The teamwork and the communication in team also improved. And there was like, oh, it works on my computer, etc., etc. Okay, when it comes to the key takeaways, I would like to underline here. As I mentioned on the start, it's one of the many approaches that we can take, and we should always consider the return of the investment of that approach, because it won't work, it won't be beneficial in each and every case. I would even say, in most of the cases, it won't, because we will either lack a proper skill set or the team maturity or involvement or of the whole organization. And of course, the team wanting that and being mature enough to work on quality is crucial here. Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Big round of applause. Here I go. Please wait till I come with the microphone so that it gets recorded.
So usually developers doesn't have such knowledge how to test, I don't know, negative flows, boundary values, etc. How do you review test cases? Yes, unit tests.
Could you repeat? I am afraid I didn't.
How unit tests are reviewed to make sure they cover what should cover?
Okay, so basically, again, in the first case, and actually in the second, the team had someone with software engineering test background. So in short, software engineering test is somebody who's very good at test automation, but also capable of developing and DevOps stuff. So basically, that was my role, to help them to understand that. And if something felt wrong, I was able to pinpoint, oh, hey, you didn't cover that. Or, as I mentioned before, having mutation testing framework, it also will point you to the areas in code that are very prone to being mutated to some different changes.
Okay, hi, I have a question. You mentioned in the benefit slide that, well, there was a benefit in the long term. What does it mean for you long term? Is it a month, a half a year, 2 years?
For me, for the product, it was around year plus. So because, in short project, if you, for example, take it for half a year, there is no point in like extensive test automation or doing shift left. But if we truly use Scrum and develop product which is going to grow, have new features, we're going to develop it, then we're going to like benefit from that a lot.
Okay, I was just wondering how much time it took you to get there. So,
in the first case, 3 years. In the second year, and it's still going.
and how does it work with return of investment?
Well, as I mentioned, the same ways of working were applied to different teams. So the organization saved basically a lot on not having manual testers. I wasn't on the business side which done the cost calculation, etc. But we didn't have to go back usually and cover some stuff manually.
Thanks.
Can you return back to the slide with case one?
Of course. Would they be
Because
worried?
I don't understand. You say that at the very, very beginning it was a team with 6 persons. At the very, very end it was 5 teams with 40 persons. It means, for me, it's not any plus. It means that the planning in your organization is very, very bad. Because if you plan at the very beginning that to solve the problem, you need 6 persons. And after 2-3 years, you find that this 6 persons is not enough. Maybe if you start with 40 persons in the very, very beginning, you finish not in 3 years, but in 1 year. It means that you have bad planning, not you, organization.
Actually, to be clear here, it was 5 teams, but not working on the same product. Because
So
again,
that's not the outcome. Because as far as I understand, you have a project. It's the very, very beginning was 6 persons, 1 team.
yes,
After 3 years, working on the project, because if you have different project working in different way, it's not the outcome from this case. I don't understand the idea. Sorry, please explain me where is the benefit that we start with 6 persons and finish with 40 persons?
the benefit was that our department in that concrete place were able to
Okay,
grow.
I'm not talking about social. You are talking about, sorry, you are talking about social, that you find next 20 persons have a good job, good salary and so on. Okay, but I'm talking from the point of project. Where is the idea that in the very, very beginning, not you, your top management, whatever, plan that it will be enough. 3 years project, 6 persons, whatever. After 2 years, you find no 1 team, but 5 teams, no 6 persons, but 40 persons. It means that it was wrong planning. It's nothing with shift left, with nothing with automation, with nothing. It's just bad planning. For me, maybe
Okay.
I'm wrong.
Okay, if you feel that, then
That might be a heated discussion during the break. Are there any more questions? Thank you very much.
Thank
A big
you.
round of applause.